You are Victor, an 18th century nobleman. You are waiting for your lover Elisa to show up in this 18th century park. You can walk around and pick up a coin to toss it in this fountain because you believe in coin tossing, fortune gooding mumbo jumbo. You can also pick up flowers for your lover and give it to her once she finally shows up. Love blossoms.
So, am I gonna get lucky tonight, or what?
Fast forward to 1 year later, Elisa now has some kind of incurable disease, and obviously 18th century doctors can't do shit to save her. Desperate, you hear a rumor about a strange count who lives far from civilization and who possesses knowledge beyond comprehension. Finding no other way to save your wife's life, you embark on a plane, train, bus or chariot or whatever this is to get to that count and seek his help to cure your wife.
Here's my advice. Don't go.
So you reach Grav Hill Manor to meet strange Count Edmund Steinroth and tell him that you're ready to do anything to save your wife. Steinroth says you look tired and asks you to go and rest in your room. And since your naive 18th century brain doesn't find anything wrong about a guy whose last name has the word rot in it, you follow his advice and go to sleep.
Go to sleep, my friend. Go to fucking sleep.
Then you wake up with blood all over you and both your memory and your wife gone.
Fuck.
You get out of the room, realize that the world has drastically changed, and the game Lamentum truly begins.
Showtime!
Before I dive into nitpicking, let me give you the gist of my general opinion of the game. I loved it and I would recommend it to anyone who loves survival horrors. It's a solid game from a first-time developer which mostly succeeds in what it set out to do. It's available on PC, Xbox, PlayStation and Switch for just $16 and gives you a roughly 6 to 8 hours of gameplay to reach one of its 4 endings. Now let me do some criticism, okay?
Okay then.
Lamentum wears its inspirations on his face by doing pretty much every classic survivor horror stuff and handles them quite well. Limited number of inventory space? Check. Safe rooms with bottomless storage box? Check. Limited saves by consuming ink to write on a journal? Check. Assembling a weapon by picking up parts from unrealistically far areas? Check. Lifting a powerful weapon from a pressure plate but getting splattered by a trap first? Then at a much later stage finding a dummy weapon and putting that in the pressure plate to fool it into not releasing the trap? Check. Loving husband in search of super sick wife in a strange place full of half-mad people bumping into a little girl who sits on an elevated platform and talks mysteriously about said wife? Check. Grave of the Fireflies? Check. Combat at first feels janky and imprecise, leading to some frustration and might even feel a bit unfair to some. But it will take you an unusually short time to get a grip on the combat system and the frustrations will be pretty much gone. Once that happened, I actually started enjoying it a lot and at this point felt that the combat has just the right amount of intentional jank that goes very well with the classic survivor horror vibe the game was going for. My only gripe with the combat system is that it lacks variety from both the weapon side and the enemy side. Sure, you will get a few different weapons with different damage outputs, but they all swing the same and the only real difference you feel while using them is in the swinging time. Some are short, some are very long. There's no way to experiment here, since unless you're going out of your way to stick to using a single weapon for some weird reason, you will be getting newer and stronger weapons almost in a linear way, and since they basically play the same, you don't really have any incentive to play with an older, weaker weapon once you get a newer, stronger one. There is well enough visual variety in enemies, but they have these similar one-dimensional repetitive patterns of attacks that get old extremely fast. Then the combat basically becomes about hitting the enemy once, then moving away to let it hit you and miss, then hitting it again.
It's not exciting.
This lack of variety makes combat quite predictable, so the further I progressed into the game, the easier the game got for me. But not in a way how most other games make you feel like you're getting better at combat due to the experience you're getting as you progress. It's more like with the passing of time you just get used to the highly predictable pattern, so you just know what to expect. This lack of challenge consequently means I needed to heal way less often as I progressed. So by the time I reached the final boss, I had plenty of healing items on hand, and apart from like the first hour or so, I never felt that sense of dread due to lacking healing items in your inventory that you're generally supposed to feel in this kind of games. Keeping with the theme of making the game easier as you progress, the last boss is a complete joke that poses zero challenge.
Oh,
Dead.
Although this high predictability in the combat system could have potentially made it very stale, two things end up saving it and still making it enjoyable throughout.
Number one.
Like most classic survival horrors, enemies don't respawn, so the repetitive combat doesn't become unbearable and feel pointless to the point that you would choose to just skip it and run past every enemy. This lack of respawning and the well thought out placement of enemies really incentivized me to focus on clearing an area first before exploring every corner of it, therefore making me actually look forward to engaging with the enemies.
Killing things clears my head.
Yes, this also kills any potential of surprise attacks once you've cleared an area, thus reduces the horror of survival horror a lot, but there's more than enough in the exploration side of the game that I prefer this over having to kill the same enemies again and again.
Number two.
The dash mechanism. Like I mentioned, the combat boils down to a sort of dance where you're supposed to strike only once and retreat. Having a dash mechanism makes this retreating part smooth and gives a sense of rhythm to the hitting and retreating. Given how slow you walk and running means holding down a button, I can see how combat would be awkward and frustrating without it. Only if the weapons had some distinguishing factor beyond damage output, the combat as a whole would be much better.
Now, this is not to say that it's bad, but it's definitely an acquired taste.
Guns, on the other hand, work really well. After firing a shot, you need to stroke your gun as if it's your
Enormous penis.
and you can't do it while moving, so it adds a lot of tension when you fire a bullet and try to ready the next one.
I think I'm gonna come.
The availability of bullets is well balanced, which never lets you feel overpowered, and the simple but effective aiming system makes gunplay very satisfying. Except keys, which don't need to be equipped but work as long as they are in your active inventory, everything else needs to be equipped before you can use them. It might feel slightly annoying at times, but I like it since it means you have to put out the lamp in order to use your weapon to fight, which makes fights in darker areas more tension-filled. It reminded me of the similar mechanism in the original version of Doom 3, which greatly enhanced the suspense and horror of the game. Too bad not many games use this kind of mechanism anymore, but Lamentum does, and I love it for this.
I appreciate you saying that.
Lamentum has an Elden Ring-like mechanism where you can run endlessly when there's no enemy around, but when you're close to an enemy, you can only run for a very short time before you run out of breath and completely come to a standstill for a short period. Having this mechanism here was a great idea. It prevents you from spamming the run button to move around the rather slow-moving enemies to kill them without a sweat. Plus, it also prevents you from running past enemies, especially bosses. And the darkening effect when you're running out of breath helps create a pretty engaging sense of tension during these scenarios. Speaking of running, I really appreciate that it exists and is quite fast. This allowed me to never feel tired of backtracking, and God knows how many times I backtracked to try different things in order to attempt getting the different endings, which I usually can't be bothered to do in most other slow-moving games. But I must say, this is one of the goofiest run animations I've ever seen.
Why are you running? Why are you running?
The whole game takes place in one mansion, which always has a potential to make you feel lost due to how similar everything can feel. But the game utilizes its 18th century aesthetics to carve out a hefty amount of visual variety in the levels, which honestly to me made the game feel more, premium as a result. Being a survival horror, of course, it has the usual survival horror tropes like locked doors with carved out symbols, boxes locked by numbers, puzzle pieces gated behind tough challenges or bosses, etc. A lot of the puzzles require you to memorize a hint you find elsewhere. Obviously, I took pictures of these hints and just solved the puzzles according to them. Was that cheating? I don't think so. Given the hints are very helpful, maybe too helpful, that they practically solve the puzzles as long as you can just memorize it, and well, when solving puzzles, I'm interested in testing my problem solving and creative thinking skills and not my memory. So yeah, in terms of complexity, the puzzles are okay. Even the puzzles which didn't require me to memorize anything didn't really wow me with their complexity, but I think that's fine.
I didn't promise this shit would be good.
The story of the game is just okay. If you've read some stories or watched a few movies of people going to strange places to achieve hard to achieve things or curing impossible to cure illnesses, then you've pretty much experienced this story before. I'd still give props though for keeping the story brief while weaving some interesting, let's call them additional branches into the story, which took some surprisingly shocking turns. I can't resist the urge to briefly discuss one of the best of these branches here, so skip to the timestamp on screen to avoid the spoiler. Shortly after the game proper begins, haunted and dumbfounded by inexplicable things happening all around, you knock on this door and a guy answers from behind. You ask for his help to make sense of what's happening. He asks you to give him a rope and agrees to help you in exchange. You get a rope and bring it to him, but instead of helping you, he just grabs the rope and shuts off. Later, after unlocking some doors, you finally reach his room to discover gotta say, I did not expect that.
Another shocking twist!
So yeah, the game is full of these short additional branches about desperate people just like you who came to Grav Hill Manor in hope of miracles. I personally found these branches to be more interesting than the central plot. Keeping up with its inspirations, a good chunk of the story is found in various notes scattered around, which I'm not a big fan of as a game mechanic, because when coming to play a game, I just simply feel like
I was elected to lead, not to read.
But well, at least the number of notes didn't feel overwhelming, so it's not really a big deal, I guess. If you're a fan of survival horrors, I'm sure you'll be perfectly fine with it. Also, I would have really appreciated voice acting on these notes, or maybe at least voice acting in dialogue scenes. I realize asking for voice dialogues is probably asking too much here, considering that the whole audio department of the game is quite subpar and clearly shows a lack of budget here. Comparing to the other visual aspects of the game, I felt the UI, especially the inventory UI, has this distinct low production value thing about it, which stuck out like a sore thumb.
Yuck.
So that's a lot of criticism, but at the risk of sounding self-contradictory, I must reiterate that I really enjoyed my time with the game. It's got great atmosphere, a nice sense of momentum, and smooth flow of progression. The story doesn't break any new ground, but provides a sturdy enough pillar for the rest of the game to stand on. The combat, despite lacking variety or surprise, remains pretty enjoyable throughout, and the puzzles, again, not doing anything we haven't seen before, strike just the right balance between too hard and too easy. Apart from the amateurish, my first game made in Unity kind of UI, which, let's be honest, doesn't really matter much, there is virtually no aspect of the game that I found to be purely bad. For a price of just $16, you get a pretty awesome survival horror experience of about 8 hours that is thoroughly enjoyable and shows great promise from a first-time developer, the next game from which I'm eagerly looking forward to.